My name's Keith. I'm a 36-year-old working for a small to mid-sized company. I live near my workplace, so I bike there every day. Figured if I'm gonna ride, I might as well do it right, so I bought a road bike and make it a point to ride along the spacious riverbank. I've totally fallen for the charms of cycling, but there's another reason I take the riverbank route. It's because of a woman who sits on a bench by the riverside. I first saw her about a month ago. I was taking a different route to work, the one that goes through this riverbank. The breeze feels good, and I even see runners out for their morning jogs, a perfect little refresh before work. I was thinking of making this my regular route. As I casually looked over the river, that's when I spotted her, a woman sitting on a bench. It was fall, getting colder, but she was in unusually light clothes for the season. She seemed a bit chilly, but was deeply engrossed in her knitting. At first, I wondered what she was making, but as soon as she had knit a little, I instantly recognized it was a heart-shaped piece. How did I know? Because there's a significant history between knitting, hearts, and me. I still have a yarn knit heart mascot attached to my bike key. It was a gift from my first love and girlfriend, Sarah. Granted, I got it over 20 years ago, and it's pretty worn out now. Back in middle school, Sarah was my very first girlfriend. Of course, being broke students, our dates were mostly hanging out in the park or talking for hours in a cheap diner. But I had the time of my life. Sarah, with a round face that suited her short haircut and cute dimples when she laughed, was incredibly adorable. So, I did a bunch of silly stuff just to make her laugh. Looking back, it's kind of embarrassing, but I was dead serious back then. She always played along, and she even gave me handmade chocolates for Valentine's. Man, was I happy. I had a bad reaction to those chocolates and spent a lot of time in the bathroom, but that didn't matter. Sarah was skilled with her hands but seemed to struggle with cucking. However, her knitting skills were top-notch even in middle school. She was always knitting something. Sometimes she'd even bring her yarn to class and knit during breaks, which led to teachers scolding her or confiscating her materials. So, when she gave me this heart mascot, I was over the moon, even more than when I received the Valentine's chocolates. Because she had knit this heart just for me. I was grinning so much that day, I must have looked ridiculous, but it made Sarah crack up. Everything with Sarah was a first for me. I genuinely loved her, and I thought we'd always be together. Our first date, the first gift, and our first kiss. We even got caught by the authorities for sneaking out late at night to talk in the park. Every moment spent with her is still irreplaceable to me. But we couldn't stay together. After dating for a year, Sarah had to move schools. And it was in another state, not somewhere a student like me could easily visit. Back then, not everyone had cell phones. They weren't something students would have. We'll definitely write to each other. We promised as I tearfully saw her off. I wrote letters every week, and at first, Sarah responded. But gradually, her replies slowed, and eventually, they stopped altogether. I tried sending more letters, but they never reached Sarah, and finally got returned to me. Our relationship, strained by the distance, fizzled out without even a proper breakup. Those memories randomly came back to me while I was riding my road bike on the way home from work. She's there, knitting on the riverbank, even when it's time for me to head back. She's finished with the heart-shaped knitting, and I stop my bike to watch, wondering what she'll make next. Maybe it's plain curiosity, or perhaps I see a bit of Sarah in her. After all, the only woman I'd ever seen knitting was Sarah. But the woman suddenly started unraveling the knitted heart she had finished. What? I exclaimed, genuinely thinking it was such a waste after all the effort she put into it. I've always seen her engrossed in her knitting, head down, so I never really saw her face, but she seemed to have a sad expression. I felt a little uneasy, but she and I were total strangers. After all, I was just observing her without any real connection. Thinking I should get moving on my road bike, a strong gust of wind blew. I braced myself to avoid falling, but the keychain I got from Sarah broke off due to wear and tear, rolling down toward the riverside. "Whoa, hey, wait," I shouted. To make matters worse, it didn't roll onto the grass but down a staircase, gaining momentum and making it hard to stop. In a panic, I jumped off my bike and ran down the riverside. I couldn't lose the precious gift from Sarah. From that rush of emotion, I yelled out loud. It was when I looked up after catching the mascot that luckily stopped near the bottom of the stairs. I caught her eye when she turned towards me at the sound of my loud voice. The first expression I saw in her, though she was skinny and her hair grown out, she looked just like Sarah. "Sarah, huh?" she gasped softly, eyes wide. Her face seemed to ask, "How do you know my name?" And then her eyes shifted to the mascot in my grasp. "No way, is that you, Keith?" Her recognition confirmed to me that she was indeed Sarah, and I found myself frozen for a moment. Well, of course. I thought she looked similar, but I didn't think she was the real deal. "Long time no see, you don't look well, though." I knew I had to say something, anything, so I forced out the words. But it seemed I'd stepped on a landmine. Sarah smiled wryly, her head bowed. Yeah, a bit of a rough patch." The reunion, after such a long time, felt awkward. Thinking to break the ice as evening approached, I decided to walk her home. Maybe, like old times, we could chat about the past. If we walked home together like we used to, we might be able to share some old stories. But then I heard Sarah's bombshell. "I don't have a home." The cozy atmosphere turned super awkward. Caught off guard, I blurted out, "What do you mean? You don't have a home?" What a spur-of-the-moment question. Sarah, with a self-deprecating tone, confessed, "Actually, after I moved, my parents got divorced. Neither of them wanted to take me in, so I ended up in a facility. It's tough to get a decent job with just a high school diploma. Now, I'm living in a cheap inn, picking up odd jobs here and there." She said this while staring at her yarn. I realized then, Sarah must be struggling financially, unable to afford new yarn. That's why she's been unraveling old pieces. Her light clothing wasn't a fashion choice, it's all she had. "Did you stop sending letters because you went to that facility?" I asked. "Yeah, things were hectic, and I couldn't take your letters, Keith. I didn't know your address, so I couldn't send any. I'm so sorry." She admitted, still looking downcast, "I just wanted to see Sarah smile again, like in the old days. Even if our connection had naturally faded, I still cared for her, still loved her. I just want her, someone I have feelings for, to be happy." "Listen, Sarah, if it's okay, could you knit this again?" I asked, handing her the worn-out heart-shaped mascot. "I'll buy the materials. Please. You've kept this thing I gave you. Haha, am I really good enough?" She laughed, a bit surprised and touched. "I want it because it's you who'll make it, Sarah." At that, she gave a modest, happy smile. Since then, Sarah started knitting my mascot again at a bench by the riverside. I'd buy whatever she told me to get and hand it to her. I considered going with her, but I didn't want her to worry about the cost, so I just handed her what I bought. In the mornings, I could do little more than greet her, but I made sure to stop by Sarah's place on my way home to talk, even for a bit. But the conversations were always about the past. About things we did in our club activities or embarrassing ourselves by hitting the wrong note during a singing contest. For us, the only common ground was those old stories. But that was enough. Because Sarah started to smile a little more. 2 weeks later, Sarah made a stunning heart-shaped mascot for me. It's clear she's improved her skills. Her mascots used to be just plain pink, but now they have red patterns on them and look much cuter. Well, This looks like something you could buy in a store. Oh, come on, it's not that great. She was modest about it, but the mascot I attached to my road bike ski was very popular at work. I want one like this. Where did you buy this? It was particularly popular among the female employees. I spontaneously thought, if Sarah sold the ones she made, she could make a living off of it. Nowadays, people thrive selling handmade items online. With some yarn, Sarah's creations would definitely sell. I was sure of it, partly because of my business intuition. So, when I suggested this to Sarah, I can't do it. Why not? It was a hit with the women at work. The problem is I don't have an address. It hit me then. Even if she made and sold the products without a permanent address, there would be no place to list for returns. She would be in a bind if there was a mistake or a return. I wish I could make a living off of knitting too, but reality's tough. How about renting an address? I suggested that to Sarah, who was downcast. Many people these days don't want to use their home address, so there are services where you can rent one monthly. Sarah was surprised and said, I didn't know that, but I don't have the money. I'll cover the costs for materials and such. Once you make a profit, you can save it and eventually rent your own place. But I don't want to trouble you, Keith. How about this? Think of it as a business deal. I believe your knitting will be a hit. It's not just about helping her because I love her. I'm truly in awe of Sarah's talent and want the world to see it. I'm willing to support her financially to make that happen. Finally, Sarah agreed, saying, I want to try it for a year. If she doesn't see results in a year, she'll quit. With that understanding, I supported her. Under that promise, I stepped in to support Sarah. But honestly, I had underestimated the situation. I was hoping that Sarah's knitting would gain traction, maybe around 6 months in. But Sarah's knitted goods started flying off the shelves almost instantly. It all began with her setting up a stall at a local flea market, where her knitted items, especially earrings and studs made with yarn, garnered a lot of attention. Thanks to this, her reputation grew, and when she participated in paid craft fairs, she made a decent profit. Of course, I helped out at the events, but Sarah is just amazing. She participates in events every month and yet never runs out of stock, always producing new items. I often wondered, how can she knit this fast and maintain this quality? Seems like she also started advertising on social media. Apparently, she began taking custom knitting orders online. She especially became a hit with moms wanting knit items for their children. Sarah is always busy knitting. Once she had saved up a decent amount of money, she could afford to buy clothes, and Sarah became noticeably more lively. She had been a bit too skinny, after all. Now when she smiles, dimples form, making her look just like she used to. In just 6 months, Sarah became a handmade crafts artist who made a significant profit, and she could purchase her own materials, and she no longer needed to stay in it. And now, she's living with me. About 3 months after she started selling her knit crafts, it honestly became more convenient for her to hold event meetings and get some assistance with delivery at my place. That's the official reason, at least. Sarah said she'd be fine living with me, and after the promised year passed, I took the plunge and proposed. She laughed and said, "We're pretty much like a married couple already," and gladly accepted. We've discussed having a wedding once things slow down a bit since Sarah is quite busy with her handmade orders. But to be honest, I just want her to finish her current crafts. After all, there are so many knitted items in our house waiting to be sold. I even built a shelf myself to help organize things. On the very night she moved in, no less. Instead of a traditional wedding night, I was doing some DIY work for Sarah. It had been a while since I did something like this, and honestly, I struggled. Seeing my efforts, she tilted her head and asked, "Having trouble fitting it in?" She said that because she noticed several bent and unusable nails around me. I just can't seem to get it right. Why does it keep bending? Why not try holding it firmly and give it another go? I took Sarah's advice and tried again, but I messed up about 7 times. The shelf I finally made turned out to be quite handy, but it seems we might need another one soon, or there won't be any room left to walk. Never thought I'd be surrounded by so much yarn, I mused, glancing at the wall. There, I saw an old worn-out heart-shaped mascot Sarah made for me, and a new one she had crafted recently. A question popped into my head. I've always wondered, why did you choose to make mascots out of knitting? It's 3-dimensional and seems quite difficult. By now, Sarah crafts them effortlessly, but back then, stuffing them with cotton must have been a challenge. As I pondered, Sarah, still knitting, said with a chuckle, "Who knows? Why don't you look it up yourself?" So, I did some research on mascots, and I understood her point. A mascot is a person, animal, or object believed to bring good luck. She gifted me the heart mascot, hoping to bring me good fortune. Maybe it's thanks to this mascot that I'm living such a blessed life now. It might even be the reason we got back together. Truly, it brought me so much luck. And as I thought this, I lovingly watched Sarah knit,